So, John, welcome to the podcast. Um, Man, you said something before we started recording that I'm just going to jump right into it. You talked about this something that your wife heard at a conference about being the CEO of your life, who's constantly changing and on the go. Does that resonate with you, or what does that? How do you conceptualize what she shared with you, and maybe if you can flesh it out a little bit to give some context to the listener about maybe why or what a CEO would do this for.
Yeah, man. That's There's a lot that I could say right now. I want to simplify things and I want to kind of tell it through my story as well. I think I grew up like the very typical, grew up in Winnipeg, small city. For like those of you in Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, we're not a big city. Um, and I was very much like I grew up in a family of just like, pretty middle class. And I just like, I was so used to being comfortable. I went to school, I got decent grades. I was like probably like a B plus student, maybe some A's here and there. I wasn't like the smartest kid, but I was like a good student. I always did what I was told, always did my homework, that kind of stuff. And then real life hit. Went to university, did everything that I thought I should have done. And, I was just so used to like following the rules, just following what you're supposed to do. Go to school, get good grades, go to university, get good grades, find a good job, work your way up, work until you're 60, 65, have a good pension, the security and all that kind of stuff. And I just wasn't happy with that path. So um, I actually went to school, kinesiology degree. I loved fitness, I loved sports. I was a basketball player. That was like my passion. And when I graduated, I had no idea what to do with myself. I didn't know like personal training. That's not a career. Like personal trainer, I just saw it as a job that, fit guys, fit girls would do just to kind of on the side, make some cash and help some people. But I didn't see it as a career. I didn't see it as like a steady paycheck, that kind of thing. So, I went back to school. I became a teacher. I did the 2 year after, after degree program at U of M, got into teaching, got my first teaching job, and man, I was just miserable that year. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. I loved coaching. I loved like, trying to inspire kids and all that kind of stuff. Um, but yeah, like going back to this, like the CEO who moves around, the conversation we were having earlier, I started to realize that I was living in complete like not aligned with what my values were. I loved freedom. I wanted to travel. I wanted to see the world. I wanted new experiences. And I was just like, I was living a life of just monotony, get your job, work your job, maybe have a few holidays here and there. And the concept, down the road, I recently got married last September. So this is now going forward maybe 10, 15 years till like, recently. And my wife, who she's in management, and she was talking about how she went to this big conference, and it was about, I forget the term of what it was, but it was essentially like the CEO who would intentionally make themselves put themselves in discomfort, put themselves in these like small, challenging environments by either like, moving frequently every 3 to 5 years, or working abroad and working from like hostels if you've got that sort of like laptop lifestyle. And I thought that was super interesting because me living like, 15, maybe even like 18, 20 years of just like learning how to be comfortable following the rules, this is sort of where, I think our society's gone to, where people can be free. They can jump on an airplane and like fly anywhere in the world and work from a laptop, and being able to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I think that's a saying that a lot of people say, but they don't necessarily live by. And that's sort of what we talked about. Just like, making yourself uncomfortable for the purpose of growth, for the purpose of like self-development, and that kind of stuff. So,
What do you think is one of the biggest challenges people face when it comes to breaking out of their comfort zone?
ooh, good question. It's hard. It's hard. It's uncomfortable. I think familiarity, being familiar with like what your day to day, your week to week, your month to month look like. Um, I think the biggest challenge is just like realizing that it's kind of like a self-confidence thing. If you're going to change your environment and you're uncomfortable, knowing if something doesn't work out how you think it would, you're going to be fine. You're going to figure it out. I think that's the biggest thing, is just the confidence in yourself, knowing you're going to figure it out no matter what happens. If it's the worst case scenario, if it's the best case scenario, anywhere in between, you're going to figure it out.
So let's bridge the gap here a bit. You talked about going through, sometimes I feel like you're almost describing exactly a similar situation to my life story growing up in Winnipeg and going to St. Paul's. So you follow the rules, you're a good boy, all these sorts of things, good grades, B plus, never the smartest, but always hardworking enough. And then when you think that you're living by this predetermined script, and once life kind of shakes you awake, I think it happens usually when you finish university. Because I was saying this to a friend the other day. Part of the reason why life goes by so fast for a lot of people is because there's no roadmap once you're in your mid 20s. Because either you don't go to university and you're very shocked, or you do go to university, finish, and then you're still shocked because you don't know exactly what it is that you want to do. A lot of people experience that. Not everybody. People that are okay with being doctors or teachers, whatever, those things, and they coast the 9 to 5, that's all good. If that's what your prerogative is, amazing. But how did you get into personal training then? What actually allowed you to make it a career if you thought before that it was just this hocus pocus and it's just some side hustle for 20-year-olds who get ripped because of high metabolism at Good Life, and it's not an actual thing that people can do to sustain a life of freedom, flexibility, and travel?
Yeah, man, there's some passion behind those words. I love it. That's a great question. Um, so going back, yeah, fitness was always, basketball was my thing. We talked about that. I really loved being active. I really loved challenging myself to be the best basketball player that I could growing up. And that led me into the gym. It led me into training. It led me into having my first trainer. Um, and then just seeing how it built my confidence. I was like a tall, skinny kid growing up, right? So you put a bit of muscle on, a little bit more confident. You feel better about yourself, better at basketball performance, all those sort of things. Um, and like I said, I didn't see a career out of it. I was like, what am I going to go work in the NBA and like work with pro athletes? That'd be awesome. Like that would be great, but that's the 1%, right? And fast forward till probably about 5 years ago when I actually started getting into the fitness industry, and I started to realize that as cool as it would be to work with pros, I really enjoyed working with essentially former athletes, people like myself who were active, who are high achievers, who still want to be fit, but they're not going to be a pro athlete. They're not doing it for a job. They just want to, live a good life. They want to feel good. They want to feel athletic. They still want to be able to play, whether it's basketball, hockey, football, like whatever the beer league is. They still want to enjoy doing those things for the sense of enjoyment. And that's sort of where, you know, my career as like a trainer, as a coach, whatever you want to call me, that's where everything sort of started from, is realizing that I've learned a lot of things in the past, and I've hired coaches, I've hired trainers, and I've learned a ton of great stuff from people. And my like downfall is I think everything I know is just common sense. And I started to realize that people didn't know these things, the simple, like everyday things that are just in my head. People didn't realize those things. And I realized that I could help a ton of people who were in my situation. And so that's where the career kind of started for me. I just, started slowly. I started with a few clients, and it kind of grew from there. So
What were you doing in between? Like, were you like, what was you were still a teacher, or you had ditched the teaching gig like after the first year?
I did exactly what you did, man. I ran away and traveled the world. So I taught for a year. And like I said, it just wasn't for me. I just knew there was something more for me. And I ended up going to Peru. There was this organization they called it backpacktivism, where a bunch of you're kind of backpacking and you're doing sort of activist work. Um, that was super scary for me because I had never really traveled before. Like I had done like just trips across Canada, go visit a buddy in Toronto for a week, like stuff like that. But
Mhm.
I've never gone outside of Canada and the States and gone to a weird country with random people that I have no clue about anything. And it was the best thing I ever did. I came back. This was like a 8 week program, 6 to 8 week program, something like that. Um, and I came back to Winnipeg thinking like, okay, this was awesome, but like now what do I do? I don't even know. Do I go back to teaching? Like, where am I going to go? And I remember sitting in the library and I don't know where it came from, but I was like, oh, I should go to Australia, like just the other side of the world, basically. And I didn't know that was a thing, like to get a like a visa, working holiday visa, where you can go work in Australia, travel Australia. I didn't really know that was a thing at the time. Um, and so I did that. I was gone for 2 years. I worked. I traveled all over Australia, Southeast Asia. It was actually 2.5 years, and it was the best personal experience, like learning about myself, challenging myself that I could possibly have done. And I came back like a totally different person, like completely different. I knew I wasn't going to get into teaching, and at that point, Sport Manitoba here in Winnipeg was opening up their brand new facility. It's an amazing facility, and I went for an interview there, and that's where I kind of started my career. Personal training was at the Sport Manitoba Center.
Man, that's a lot of. I'm sure you probably got this a lot. Oh, you went to Australia? You traveled Southeast Asia? Must be nice. Wow, that's amazing. You're so lucky. But were you thinking that the entire time, or did you still go through the day-to-day struggles of, oh man, like this thing is hard, or I don't know how to say this in this language, and man, where the hell do I get this food, or blah blah blah, and what's this, and where do I go, and I don't know anyone here.
Dude, that yeah, 100%, especially at the start. Um, I went with another organization that helped me to get there, and they're like, we're gonna set you up with a bank account. You know, there's backpacking communities. We're gonna set you up with a job. We're gonna get you an apartment, like everything. They're basically gonna set you up for life. Um, when I got there, yeah, okay, cool. We got me a bank account. I probably could have done that myself in like 10 minutes. Not hard. Um, Jobs were scarce. Nobody wanted to hire backpackers because they knew that we weren't going to stay long term. We're just there to make a bit of money and then peace off and travel. So it's tough to find jobs. I was hustling on, so Kijiji is our Winnipeg, like sort of buy and like find jobs, Indeed, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Theirs was called Gumtree, which was super weird. So I was looking for jobs on Gumtree, like tutoring, teaching jobs, fitness jobs, anything. And the one job that I found that was hiring was a fundraising, like a face-to-face fundraising job. So those are the guys on the street wearing bright red, bright orange, bright yellow t-shirt with an iPad, a crazy hat. You're stopping everyone that comes in contact with you and trying to, essentially get them to donate to a charity. And it's like a long-term donation. So credit card, you're on a, monthly donation. And that was, I would say, probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Like I sucked. I was terrible. I was afraid of rejection. I didn't know how to sell. I was this like tall guy I just felt like, everyone was super awkward because everyone hates fundraisers. They don't want to be bothered. They're trying to get to work, trying to get home from work. They're just trying to do some shopping and you're bugging them for money. Um, and long story short, I had a coach, my manager. He essentially taught me the first mindset, sales, marketing skills that I would start to kind of learn from there. And I sort of started to work my way up, and I ended up doing quite well with it. But it was, yeah, to go back to your question, it was the hardest thing ever. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows going to Australia at
What
the
was the
start.
first? What was the first valuable thing that he taught you that you haven't forgotten since?
There's a lot. I would say like an overarching theme is how important mindset is, and how, in terms of controlling what you can control and letting go of what you can't control. And I think a big thing goes about is like rejection, right? I always grew up being the kid that, or the adult or the guy that wanted to be liked by everyone. I'm like a people pleaser, right? I still say it. I'm a recovering people pleaser. I want to be liked, and if someone doesn't like me, I take that personally. And I shouldn't say now, but I did take it really personally. I found my value and my self-worth in like what I thought others thought of me. So the hardest possible job I could do was be a fundraiser where I would say upwards of 95% of it is rejection. You stop 100 people, 95% of the people are going to walk away, swear at you, whatever, and then 5% of the people are actually going to talk to you. So I think that was sort of the biggest lesson that I learned off the start.
Man, we're just two sides of the same coin, aren't we? Recovering people pleasers that take like when you find out that someone didn't like you for whatever arbitrary reason, and it became personal with me.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
What do you think is the like? How do you grapple with that? Because I know that it's something that is so difficult for any, or if you're listening and you have struggled with people pleasing and being concerned, if even so much as one person, like you meet 100 people and one or two of them don't like you, like it can just seem so daunting. How do you still wrestle with that to this day? Because it's not something that just boom, it vanishes overnight.
No, not at all. I think for me, the thing that I learned, and this was probably in the last, I don't know, probably in the last like 3 years, was when I started working with a coach, a business coach, and just sort of learning like what my values are and like what makes me feel worthy as a human being, and realizing that in the past it was always performance. I said, as a basketball player, it's like, if you're the best player in the court, you're valuable, you're worthy, you're people are going to look up to you, and that's what made me feel like I was worthy. And then what other people thought of me, it was like, if people like me and people look up to me and they see me as a leader, that makes me valuable, that makes me worthy, that makes me confident, that makes me feel good. And then realizing that none of that matters, because people can change their mind in a second, right? I think the big thing I learned too was just that everything's a mirror. Everyone's just like looking at you. It's a mirror of themselves. So if they're in a good mood, they're feeling good about themselves, they're going to see good in you. And then they're going to like treat me a certain way based on how they feel. But then let's say the next day something happens in their life and they're miserable, they're grumpy, they're not feeling confident. They're going to project that onto me. And then I'm going to take that personally, thinking that they don't like me. What did I do wrong? What did I say to them? Why don't they like me? And it has nothing to do with me. It's them in their life. And I think for me, that was a big realization that it's not all about me. I'm not the center of the universe. People have their own lives. People have their own issues. And people aren't thinking about you as much as you think they are, right? People have their own problems, their own things that they're going through. And you end up being just a projection in a mirror. And it kind of shows you, that we're all kind of like selfish in a way. Like you just think everything's about you, but it's not. So that's what really helped me to realize that everyone's got their own lives and no one really cares that much about me and my life,
You mentioned working with a business coach. It's such a hilarious coincidence you're talking about this. I was literally reading into that exact subject yesterday because when I was reflecting with my path and my journey, and I was thinking about when you enter into the pathless path where there is no specific direction that you have to go in based on the choices you're making. It's almost just like any road can take you there if you don't have a specific direction. And I'd had people tell me before, like, man, like the same concept of the things that you say, they're gold and they're so valuable. And I'm just like, but this is common sense. I'm like, oh, wait a second. What we think is common sense may not be common sense to 95% of people. And my friend, we were out for breakfast the other day, and he said to me, have you ever taken a personality test before? And I was like, no, like, why would I do that? He's like, oh, you should do it right now. I was like, okay, sure. So I did it. And then I was reading through the final results, and it was like, okay, your character type is protagonist. And one of the things it talked about is that you enjoy leading other people, and you're passionate and you're driven, and you believe that whenever you can bring people together, that you can do a world of good. But some of the weaknesses it talked about is that you become shocked when you find out that others don't share the same core values as you. And it's just like mind blowing. You're like, what?
Yeah,
People
man.
don't prioritize health and fitness. People don't prioritize reading the ingredient label. People don't prioritize, like, the list goes on and on. And because of that, I guess, disconnect between how others think and how you think, it's an area I feel like it's an opportunity for growth. And I feel like in particular, that's where I think that you have found your bread and butter, at least from everything that I've seen you do on social media. And when I came across your page, because I was like, man, like, this guy writes such great copy. I love reading his posts. They're so informative and so amazing. But it's not like you've reinvented the wheel. It's not like all the things you're saying, you're the only person who's ever said them in the history of mankind. Like,
Yeah.
so many people, like, read stoicism, read this person, that person. Like, it's all just repackaged wisdom. But I think that's the thing that is just like, so that it might have been difficult for you to maybe understand that at first, or maybe you don't even realize that, like, you provide so much more value than you think in what you're saying and what you're sharing, even though it might seem like, oh, whatever. I've known this forever. Who cares? It's not a big deal.
Yeah, man. I appreciate that first of all, because I've been a little slacking on the social media front of things, just because, and like we talked about, it's like one of my downfalls. You talk about personality tests, like one of my downfalls is just like I tend to be like a humble person, which can be good, but it's also I tend to, in the same sort of vein, like put myself down. It's just like I don't know anything. Like I want to learn. I know there's like so many smart people that I surround myself around, which is intentional. But then because I surround myself with people who are smarter than me, I feel like I don't have anything to give when I realize that there's a lot of wisdom that I've learned that I can pass on to other people and share with other people. But I think, yeah, it's interesting. We get in our own heads. We kind of hold ourselves back from the things that we know we want to do and the things that we think we should do. And whether it's ego, whether it's like self-worth, or whether it's just like, you know, a lack of clarity, that kind of stuff. I think it's important to realize that sharing stuff from your perspective is super important. Like I can go and repackage anything, and I like I'll look up, find some good stuff on Instagram, and I'll just repackage it as like, you know, something that I think people should hear. But if it comes from me and my story and like a genuine connection with it, something that I've actually been through, it's so much more powerful than just sharing a bunch of words that I think are cool. And that's why, you know, you used to see like the quotes. Remember on Instagram it was all like people posting quotes, like motivational quotes and all that. And I thought it was cool, but I didn't feel those quotes. I didn't like connect with what the meaning of that quote was. I just like it made sense. It sounded cool. People need to hear this, but there's a million quotes, and like you gotta pick ones that resonate with you, that you've actually felt. And I think that's where authenticity comes across on social media or marketing in general, is just like being authentic and using your message and your story to share something.
Man, it's so true, and it just bears repeating over and over and over and over and over again. Like, on authenticity combined with wisdom. Look at someone, for example, like Ryan Holiday. If you know, Ryan Holiday repackage stoicism into actionable tips and things that are digestible and easy for people to follow. And the Stoics they existed hundreds and hundreds of years ago. It's not like what Ryan Holiday is saying is brand new information, but at the same time, the way that he packages it with his story, with the things that apply to him, with the things that resonate with other people, and in the present day life, that's what's made his message, his books so powerful, is because, yeah, you're right. You know, Epictetus said this and that and the other, or Socrates said blah, 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 blah. And those things you can see in real life today, for example, when it comes to working out or something with your kids or with your job or whatever it is, rather than like those problems that they didn't necessarily have specifically back then. But as that saying goes, talking about quotes, you know, if you want a new idea, read an old book.
Yeah. Yeah, totally, man. Totally. I got my daily stoic right here. And I think
There you
like,
go. Look at that.
I don't know, man. When I read it, you realize like these are real people. And it also like makes me really grateful and appreciative of the world that we live in, and how easy sitting at a nice desk. I got a comfortable chair with like, air conditioning and like a beautiful house. It's like these guys lived in, you know, ancient times, but this wisdom that they learned, it's, like you said, we can still apply it to our day-to-day life now. And I think we get going back to like the comfort, right? The whole traveling thing, we get so comfortable with our, what do you want to call it, luxury, whatever, all the privilege that we have, that you sort of lose that. I don't know what the word is. It's like the Goggins, like you just get soft, right? You get soft, and it just doesn't go well for people. So
I feel like one of the biggest misconceptions of travel is that people think that your problems will just vanish when you go somewhere else. They just
yeah,
think, oh wow, like for example, when I went to Fiji and it was an amazing time, but we still experienced problems and issues and things came up, and it's just a different set of problems. And I know that people will see from the outside like, man, you got to go climb this mountain or do this thing. And it's like, what people don't really see always is like, you think potholes are bad in Winnipeg? Well, you rent a car on the other side of the world and the potholes are just absolute canyons. Like if you drive through a pothole, rest in peace to that car. And then the issues that come up with if people aren't respecting the rules of the road, way worse than here in Canada, let alone Winnipeg, or the constant barrage of people trying to rip you off or scam you because, again, a lot of people there are poor, or the food like being different in terms of like if you're not used to it or if it can make you sick or vomit. Like people say, oh, like mushrooms are gross. I'm like, dude, you can't drink the water that comes out of the fountain there at all. Like you're going to get a free colonoscopy if you're not careful with drinking this water. And
yeah,
so I'm sure you can even speak to some of the personal experiences you went through, especially talking about Southeast Asia, where they have like the Bali bug or whatever it is for people who aren't used to eating food in certain places there. What
yeah.
were some of the things that you went through that made you realize, wow, we actually have it pretty good? Or, you know what? There's still going to be problems when I travel and maybe I'm ignorant, or maybe you weren't ignorant and you knew that there was going to be these things when you traveled out there.
Yeah, I think what comes to mind for me was in Vietnam. Vietnam. I remember seeing, so it's still a communist country, right? And everybody works 7 days a week. Like everyone's always working. They have a shop and they just live in their shop and they're trying to sell stuff. And I remember just seeing that everywhere. And I realized, like, back home, we would get so stressed out about working like a 40-hour week, or like, heaven forbid you're working overtime and you're working a 50-hour week and you're making time and a half or double time. And everyone just stresses out about like, oh man, like I got to work on Saturday. I got to work on the weekend. Like this is bullshit. I'm like, Vietnam, they literally like all day, every day, they're just in their store. They're just trying to make a living, and they just need to sell a bunch of stuff so that they can get dinner that night. There's no holidays. There's no days off. There's no like, it's, you're always working. And I think that really stuck with me, just around the privilege that we have of like the way that we work here in North America. But I think like, yeah, I think that was the biggest thing, is just culture, man. It's just the culture change.
So now as a personal trainer, like what are some of the things that you enjoy the most about getting to work with your clients, and what elements of these travel experiences do you find have been incorporated into how you look at the job that you have now, or even if you would consider it being like a job because of how well it seems to mesh with your personality and with all the experiences you've been through?
Totally. That's a good question. I think the biggest thing, kind of going back to what you talked about, the problems, everyone thinks, especially now, you see like the laptop lifestyle of being able to go to a coffee shop anywhere, sit in Starbucks, and you're working on your business, or you can, go to Bali, work on your business, that kind of thing. I think, like you said, there's just different problems. Just because it's like it's cool, it's like fun, it's you're free, you have the freedom. With that comes other problems, right? And I think going back to your question with traveling, the thing that I really connect between like my coaching business, training business, whatever you want to say, and the fundraising side of it is, you have to be I would say right now you have to be organized, right? Especially as like a solopreneur. I don't work for anyone. I don't have employees. I'm like on my own sort of thing. It's like, you're a coach, you're a trainer, you're an accountant, you're a bookkeeper, you're um admin, everything. You got to kind of figure out systems that work for yourself. And I think when you're traveling too, you got to figure out systems that are going to work for you. You can't do it all, but you can't do it all. Or what's the saying? You can do anything, but you can't do everything, right? And I think it's important to really realize, like, prioritize what's important. When you go traveling, whether it's a holiday, you want to see certain things. If it's like, like we did, personal development and just kind of like exploring the world and different experiences, you got to kind of like have a bit of a game plan to start. Of course, it's going to change as you go. You never stick to things 100%, but I think, yeah, just kind of like knowing what you're after. Why are you there? Having a purpose, having like a sense of direction, so to speak.
Yeah, that hits home for me so much, and it almost feels sometimes like you're speaking to every single thing I'm going through without even knowing it. You're just kind of like incrementally unraveling all the things that go through my head on a daily basis. Talk about having a plan and purpose, and I remember feeling this big rush, like when I came back from Fiji. I was like, man, like, oh my goodness, like I just transitioned jobs, and I wasn't satisfied with what I was doing before, and it was just like this big like whoosh. You go to the other side of the world, you feel like you're on another planet, like this is crazy. And then I
Yeah.
come back and you're like, it's time to yank the plug and go around the globe and do all these things. But then you're like, wait a second. Where do you go? When do you go? What do you do? How do you fund it? And then it all just starts to feel like you're looking down 150 meters, like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I can do this. But then you
Yeah.
say this with this idea of making sure you have a plan. I think that's just such an underrated, like, it sounds so obvious, but it's clearly not that obvious. Like, if you don't have a plan with something that you're trying to do or whatever it is, winging it is only going to get you so far. And if you just rely too much on that, then like that's such a bang on quote. You can do anything, but you can't do everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh
100%.
man.
100%. And I know our mutual friend, shout out to, he's my coach right now, David Gischetta. This is the stuff that I've been learning of just organizing and planning, and strategic planning is the word that he uses. And I think like you said, after school, there's no roadmap. It's like you can follow the people that you look up to and who you think are successful, and kind of do what they do and copy what they do, but it's only going to get you so far because you don't have the same values as them. You haven't lived the same life as them. You're not the same person as them. And I think it's a good place to start. I always love the advice of never take advice from someone who you don't want to trade places with, because I would get tons of advice from people, and I would take it all to heart, and I'd be like, oh, this guy said this, and then this person said this. Like, the fuck do I do? Sorry, I don't know if we can swear on here, but
All good, man. All good.
um, I was just like, you got to figure out, and I think it's the North Star. It's the values and learning what your values actually are. You can log on to or jump online and search up values and all this stuff, and it's like there's a million different things, but until you actually feel it, until you actually do the work to figure it out instead of just like kind of guesswork, you're just going to kind of be winging it, right? And when you finally figure out what actually matters to you, and people always say it's like, oh yeah, family matters to me, health matters to me, like all the stock answers, until you actually believe it and actually feel it. Like for me, health, as like a fitness trainer, like until this last couple years, I don't want to say I didn't care about health, but I didn't feel it. For me, it was fitness. I've always been healthy. I've never had any health issues, anything like that, knock on wood. For me, it was always fitness. And like, I just wanted to look jacked. I wanted to be an athlete. I wanted to like be confident. And then, I'm 37 now. I hit like 30, whatever it was, 33, 34. And you start to realize like health isn't a given. It can be taken away from you at any second. It can, you can be healthy for your whole life and something can happen. And I think that was when I finally felt it. And I was like, oh shit, health is a value for me. I train, my workouts are now so that I can continue to be healthy. I still want to look good, but like the fit or the health side of it instead of the fitness side of it became so apparent to me. Um, and I think that was going into the values work, like you said, people, there's no roadmap. There's no roadmap. How do you figure out your values? Like, what does that even mean? No one's teaching this stuff. You don't learn in school, don't learn it in university. I had to hire coaches to help me do this. And I think that's what's missing. Now there's tons of coaches, but I think that's what's been missing. If I had that in my early 20s, not that I would have been mature enough. I don't know if I really would have cared that much. I don't know, obviously the maturity level sort of thing, but I just didn't know what mattered to me, and it took time to get there.
So if I was to ask you, what advice would you give to a 20-year-old or someone who's in their 20s? What advice would you give them based on what you know now?
Yeah. So based on my experience of what I was like, let's say like 18, like when you're graduating high school, you're kind of like 18-ish, 19, going to university 20-ish, somewhere around there. Um, I would say follow your fear. One of my favorite quotes is the cave that you're afraid to enter holds all the treasures that you want. Like I fucking love that quote because it connect with it so much. Like I was just so afraid to do things, so I didn't do them. And then those were the things that would literally lead me exactly to where I wanted to go. So going into fitness, going back to like my teaching story, I was just scared because I didn't know what my path would be. I loved fitness, but I didn't know. I was just scared. So I was just like, oh, I'm scared, so I'm not going to do it. I'll just go into teaching. It's like the safe route, It's kind of like what you're told to do. But as soon as I took that leap, I just like went to Peru, went to Australia. It was scary as fuck, but it literally led me to exactly what I needed and to this fundraising job, which taught me, sales and marketing skills. It taught me mindset work, stuff that I still do to this day in my business at home here, like in Winnipeg. So yeah, follow your fears. If something's scary, probably should do it for the most part. There's probably some stuff you shouldn't do, but if you're afraid to do something, what's the worst that can happen?
John, so powerful, man. So powerful. Just feel the energy. Like man, this has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed everything we've chatted about. This is better than I could have expected. So I really want to thank you for having me on today's episode, man. This was so much fun.
Dude, I appreciate it, man. That was awesome.